This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Hi everyone, I know we're all hurting right now. Crypto has taken a beating, and Goldman Sachs says flatlining is the best case for stock-heavy portfolios. Flatlining? Zero returns? Sheesh. In situations like these, we can take a cue from the world's best investors, because a groundbreaking Ernst & Young study last year revealed that 8 in 10 ultra-high net worth individuals invest in alternatives. However, Bank of America's CIO recommends investing in one specific high-performing alternative to rescue your cash. He's talking about fine art. 2/3 of millionaires already hedge against inflation with art, according to UBS, because the last time inflation was this high, art appreciated by an unprecedented 33.2% annually. Now, obviously, most folks don't exactly have tens of millions lying around to start buying Banksys and Basquiat's, but that's where Masterworks comes in. They're helping people keep their cash intact by offering fractional investments in the top 1% of the art world. And with a recession on the horizon, they've seen sign-ups increase by 320%. That, combined with the fact that they speak to every investor to make sure art is right for them. That means there's a wait list, but I'm hooking you guys up with priority access to skip the line, and it's as easy as going to masterworks.com and using promo code CryptoConversation. That's masterworks.com, promo code CryptoConversation, and you can see important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.com/CD. Again, that's masterworks.com, and use the promo code CryptoConversation to skip the line. And now, folks, it is on with the show. My guest today is Jay Jog. Jay is the engineering lead for Sei Network, which is a layer 1 blockchain with a built-in order book and described as the fastest DeFi layer 1, I believe. A very interesting welcome to the show, Jay.
Hey, Andy. Thank you for having me on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, man. I'm doing okay. I hope you're doing okay as well. So, well, let's find out. We'll do what we do at the beginning of the show, Jay. Please tell us how you're doing, and please also introduce yourself. Love to hear a little bit about who you are, where you're from, what you've been doing in the lead up to getting involved with Sei Network.
Awesome. Cool. So my name is Jay. I'm a co-founder for Sei, lead engineering. And I personally got into crypto back in 2017. At that time, my roommate was going through Binance Launchpad, so we worked on a few different projects together. And afterwards, I ended up joining RobinHood. So I spent almost 4 years at RobinHood, saw the company 10x. It was definitely interesting to work there because one thing that RobinHood did really well is they were able to get retail to start trading options, right? No one in traditional finance has been able to successfully do that. In DeFi, people have been throwing incentives to encourage organic usage ever since DeFi got off the ground. And no one has been able to do that. But on the other hand, RobinHood did successfully crack that puzzle. So it was interesting to see how they approached it. On the other hand, the way that they handled GME last year, I'm sure you were following along. It was quite messy.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of our customers were not very happy. And I mean, even as an insider, everything was just very opaque from us. We had no clue what decisions were being made and why they were being made. And that kind of served as the inspiration for my co-founder and I last year. To start looking into building something like Robinhood, except building it on-chain in a trustless and transparent manner. So that was the kind of inspiration for how we originally got started with this. We were trying to build a derivatives exchange on-chain. And then afterwards, we started investigating every layer 1, every layer 2, and all the other infrastructure out there that we could use to get basically a derivatives exchange up off the ground. And we ultimately came to the realization that layer 1s right now, they're holding back exchanges. Every single exchange that has taken off so far has done so in spite of the underlying layer 1, not because of it. And this is because layer 1s right now, first of all, they don't have any DEX optimizations. Secondly, they run into congestion issues, which is tolerable if you're an NFT collection, but catastrophic if you're an order book exchange. And they're also a tad bit too slow, even the newer ones like Aptos and Sui. So because of that, we started building Sei, which is an L1 that's optimized for trading. And we aim to help give exchanges an unfair advantage.
Yeah, very interesting, Jay. And we'll get into Sei Network a little bit more in a moment or so. But yeah, I've got just talking of your time at Robinhood, and of course, the GameStop saga. It's funnily enough, I don't know if you've seen it. It's just come out on Netflix. It's like a three-part kind of. I don't know if it's a documentary or, what you would call it, but yeah, let's call it a documentary. It's called Eat the Rich, the GameStop Saga. It's a little bit sensationalized. It's for Netflix, but it is a lot of fun nonetheless. And they gloss over some of the nitty-gritty a bit, but they do point out the kind of the circumstances when Robinhood effectively stopped allowing people to. They just removed the buy button effectively, and that was kind of game over from that point on. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the specific scenario that I was referring to. And I mean, Robinhood had their own reasons. It wasn't driven by like the need to screw over customers or anything like that. But it was honestly not handled well at all. The communications around it, the transparency around it was pretty negative. And I mean, I personally didn't know about this Netflix series. I haven't been watching too much TV recently,
Sure.
but this seems like a fantastic thing for me to watch. So I'll try to look into it and watch
Oh,
it in the next couple of weeks.
yeah, definitely. It has they do a good job in terms of they interview quite the cast of characters and some of the kind of the early personalities who were responsible for kind of seeding the narrative in Wall Street Bets on Reddit, and then some of the I suppose the early adopters who did make a lot of money out of it. And yeah, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. That's
That's
cool.
awesome. So did they interview DCF God? I remember that was his name, right? And I think he fell out of the public spotlight a little bit over a year ago.
Say again, what was his handle?
DCF God, I think that was one of the main people who kicked off the GME kind of
Yeah.
mania back in, I guess he got into it back in 2020.
Yeah, there was one guy. I think it was. I'm not sure what. Can't recall his handle, but he was one of the main guys who was kind of anonymous. And then he was on. He was one of the YouTubers actually, but he stayed anonymous. But they found out who he was, and it turned out he did actually come from an investment bank background, but had kind of gone rogue.
Exactly, that's who I was referring to. But anyway, yeah, seems like a fantastic thing to watch. And I mean, that was kind of the reason that we ended up initially working on this. It just felt really messy the way that everything was handled in that transparent or not transparent manner, in that opaque manner. And we thought that like longer term transparency is important for customers. So that was the initial motivation for us to start working on what ultimately became Say.
Okay, well, understand that then. So there's a difference, of course, between something a consumer stock trading app like Robinhood. One of the reasons for the success of Robinhood, as you'll only be too well aware, Jay, of course, is they made the UI and the UX quite slick and quite easy, and they added gamification elements as well, notoriously.
Mhm.
So yeah, people really enjoyed that experience. Whereas I'm sure what you guys are building is fantastic, but it's a different challenge when you're trying to build an on-chain version, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, what we're trying to do now, we're not even building the exchange ourselves. We're just building the infrastructure so that other people can try to come and build successful exchanges. So, the interesting thing about Robinhood overall is they just had insane customer focus. Like they kept repeating that, but I think that that is honestly pretty true. Like the reason they were able to get people to trade options, which are honestly very complex financial instruments, is because they were very meticulous with the way that they designed everything. And I honestly feel like crypto has room to go. Like, yes, everything that's happening on chain is a little bit more complicated just because it's happening on chain. But even once you go past that initial bottle, like the initial hurdles of like going through KYC on a centralized exchange, then afterwards purchasing crypto and then bridging it onto your MetaMask or whatever wallet you're using, like even afterwards, I still think crypto's way too complicated. And I think a lot of the stuff that Robinhood did, people should use that for inspiration in terms of how to build um, just good DeFi products for retail to be using.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's just learn a little bit more about, I suppose, the technicalities of what you're trying to do with Sei. So you describe it as the first layer 1 blockchain designed for trading. And then you talk about in the docs, how most layer 1s fall in between, or they fall into two extremes, general purpose chains on the one end, Solana, Ethereum, and the like. And then you've got app-specific chains on the other end, such as Osmosis. So you're talking about, I think, a new design space somewhere in between. What do you mean, Jay?
Exactly. So general purpose chains, they benefit from composability, which means you can have atomic transactions between different projects building on that chain. They also benefit from social coordination. So everyone that is part of that ecosystem, they're all on the same team. On the other hand, application-specific chains, they benefit from customizability. You can control every single layer of the stack to optimize and lead to better experiences for your specific use case. So rather than going down just one of these extremes, we realized that building something that is in the middle that takes advantage of both of these is the ideal way to build out a good DeFi ecosystem. So that's what Sei is. It's a use case specific chain. So we've optimized every single part of it to lead to better experiences for exchanges building on top. For example, we have a native order matching engine that helps exchanges scale. But on the other hand, we do have composability. So similar to, rather than only having one application that exists on Sei, we're allowing people to write their own smart contracts and build up their own projects on top of Sei. And I think that ends up being really interesting because now you can have projects that are composable with each other, which leads to faster innovation. And you also end up having an ecosystem of people that all are building on that, lead to the ecosystem growing 10x faster than if you're just a siloed app chain that is only building one specific type of product. So that's what we started doing. In terms of the technical side per se, there's three overarching things we've done that make the chain better for exchanges. The first one is that native order matching engine that I was talking about. So because of the native order matching engine, you get front running prevention, and you also get better user experience for market makers and users, which helps exchanges both from a scaling standpoint and also just from a user experience standpoint. The second thing that we've done is we've changed the consensus algorithm. So rather than using pure tendermint, which is what you normally get if you're using Cosmos SDK, we've changed the way that blocks are propagated and the way that blocks are proposed, which leads to better latency and throughput, which is one of the biggest problems that order book-based exchanges run into when they're trying to build on general purpose chains right now. And the third thing is we make use of market-based parallelization. So we're currently the only Cosmos SDK-based chain to make use of parallelization, and this greatly helps improve performance as well. So at this point, we're at around 22,000 orders per second that can be processed. And we also have a lot of other benefits, like I mentioned before, with the front running prevention that makes Sei the ideal place for exchanges to come and build.
And so the idea is, like a decentralized Robinhood or a decentralized NASDAQ, however people like to think about these things. And what kind of teams are you working with? Some exchanges, or is it just up to new exchanges or existing exchanges to come along and spin something up with you guys? Where are you at?
Yeah, so our vision is to enable all types of DeFi applications to come and coexist on Sei, right? So originally we got started, we launched our testnet back in May of this year. At that time, we already had the native order matching engine built with the chain, and there were a few exchanges that were building that were making use of the order matching engine, right? Because that is the primary use case. If you have this chain with this order matching engine primitive built in, then it makes a lot of sense to build an exchange that is leveraging that. What ended up happening after that was interesting, though. As soon as there ended up being some applications that were building on Sei, and as soon as it became clear that Sei was doing stuff that is interesting from a DeFi perspective, it suddenly became very strategic for a lot of other types of applications to come and start building on Sei. So now at this point, we have every single type of DeFi primitive that is building on Sei, and there's some more interesting use cases as well that also have been recently announced. So yeah, I mean, in the longer term, there's going to be every single type of DeFi application that can coexist on Sei. And in general, I think that there are very strong network effects to any DeFi ecosystem. As soon as you have TVL and users in any one spot, it becomes very easy to deploy a new application and get greater volume by just building as part of that ecosystem. And that's one of the reasons why Ethereum was able to take off initially. And that's one of the reasons why Solana was also able to do a pretty good job from the DeFi side. And yeah, I mean, longer term, we definitely see Sei going down that same route. So at this point, we have over 50 teams that are building on Sei ahead of the mainnet launch. And there's just been a lot of inbound interest coming in over the past few weeks as well.
Very, excuse me, very nice, Jay. And I can see, you know, in terms of the team that you guys have put together, Sei Labs is comprised of developers from RobinHood. I guess you tick that box. You're a founder as well, of course, but also developers from Databricks, Airbnb, with extensive expertise, and of course the Cosmos stack developers. You did talk about some Cosmos OGs, I think, but also finance and strategy members from Goldman Sachs and other market makers. So I guess it kind of sounds like you've got all bases covered in terms of that. It sounds like the kind of team you'd need to build the decentralized rails for Nasdaq or Robinhood.
Exactly, yeah. So our team is currently 18 folks. From the engineering side, we have 8 people, largely from Robinhood and Databricks. One of the folks on our team, Tony, he was the fastest person to ever get promoted to staff engineer at Robinhood. And he's been leading a lot of the efforts in helping build the chain out. Another person on our team, Phil, he was previously at Databricks for a few years before joining us, and he was leading the Kubernetes, like he was a tech lead for Kubernetes at Databricks. And one thing that I've just generally noticed is that building an L1 chain is arguably the most interesting problem from a technical side to be solving in crypto. There's like different parts of the stack, right? There's like NFT collections that I would argue are the most user-facing, most front-end part of it. And from a technical side, they're not that interesting to be building. One layer deeper than that is DeFi protocols. So these involve writing smart contracts and coming up with more of the logic around how these DeFi primitives should be operating. And writing smart contracts, I think that it's interesting at the start, but in the longer term, a lot of developers get bored with it because it's similar to writing web apps where it's pretty repetitive types of work. And the deepest layer is building an L1 chain. And with building an L1 chain, it's fundamentally a distributed systems problem. And then once you add in the consensus side of it, which is very academic in nature as well, it's very interesting for engineers to come in and just think about how to solve these difficult problems. And there's a lot of just new problems that keep coming up around, there's just different classes of problems that we've been running into. For example, one recent thing that we've done a lot of thinking about is maximal extractable value and how to either prevent it or redistribute it. It's been, I think, a very interesting technical problem that a lot of engineers are interested in.
Yeah, no doubt. And it seems like you guys have some pretty interesting names that are backing you, Jay. I can see in August you raised, I think, 5 million, led by Multicoin Capital, with participation from Coinbase Ventures, Delphi Digital. Those are impressive names.
Yeah. So earlier this year, we raised a small seed round of $5 million. We were very methodical and thoughtful about the partners that we were working with for that. And Multicoin led the round. Multicoin is generally regarded as one of the best VC firms out there in the entire crypto industry. And they specifically are a very good fit for us because they've helped Solana get off the ground in the past as well. And they've also been involved in a lot of DeFi projects building in Solana and other ecosystems as well. So because of that, they seemed like quite possibly the best fit for us. And a lot of the other players, a lot of the other investors in the round, they've helped build L1 chains and scale L1 chains and get DeFi projects off the ground, or they've been actively involved in market making on chain. So because of that, we're very happy with the kind of partners that we've been able to get around the table. And we made the announcement back in August. And after we made that announcement, as you can expect, once you have Multicoin involved in around, there suddenly ends up being a lot of inbound interest. So I think there ended up being a lot of teams that wanted to build on, say, reaching out, and just other people that are interested in learning more.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what then is, I can see you've also launched a 50 million ecosystem fund, or is that ecosystem and liquidity fund to support new DeFi applications on Sei Network, right?
Exactly. So one thing that we noticed is that a lot of the initial folks that were building on Sei, a lot of the initial projects, they'd already raised multiple millions in seed funding to build their project on other ecosystems, and then they were starting to build on Sei as well. So in their case, they weren't really strapped for any kind of cash. And in their case, like getting a grant or having promise of future fundraising didn't really move the needle too much in terms of building on Sei. But there's an entirely other category of founder who's basically someone like me, right? Who is working at a place like RobinHood, who's trying to make that leap of that leap to start going all in on crypto. And in their case, getting like some amount of like idea that, okay, I will be able to raise pretty easily. There's all this funding in the ecosystem, and there will be liquidity that can exist on my exchange, and there's guarantees of that. That did move the needle a lot for them. So that's why we felt it was important to have an ecosystem fund. There's two main things that this fund is going to be used for. The first thing is this fund will be used to basically invest in company or in projects that are building on Sei. So the investors that are participating in our round and some other investors that came in, they basically committed that, yes, we'll be using this money to help grow out the Sei ecosystem. And the second thing is it's going to be used for liquidity. So any exchanges that are building on Sei, one of the biggest questions they're going to have is, where do we get liquidity from? Are market makers even interested in providing liquidity here? And the answer to that is yes, market makers are very interested, and they've committed $50 million to help participate in providing liquidity as well. So those are the two major use cases. And I think this does provide a lot of reassurance for teams that are a little bit worried about where the liquidity is going to come from, where the fundraising is going to come from. This addresses a lot of those issues.
Sure. Well, let's, as we finish off this part of the podcast, then, Jay, what would you say to any devs or teams or DeFi power users that are listening and they want to get a little bit more involved with the Sei Network? What should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, so I mean, if you just want to learn more, we have our website, seinetwork.io. That has links to all of the different places you can go to. I would recommend Twitter and Discord as the primary places, and Discord especially is where all of the alpha gets dropped initially. Beyond that, if you want to start getting your hands dirty with actually trying out Sei, we're currently in an incentivized testnet period. So anyone that wants to actually try using Sei in its testnet form, there's different applications that have deployed in our testnet, so you can play around with them. One of them is Vortex, which is a perpetuals trading product, and you can actually go and trade testnet tokens on that platform. And yeah, we also have incentivized testnet rewards. So 1% of the total tokens apply will be given out to people that participate in the incentivized testnet. So definitely encourage everyone to come and try it out and get more involved with the community.
Awesome. And the link will be in the show notes, folks, but the website is, Sei Network IO, and Sei is spelled S-E-I. All right, let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll have some fun. We'll run Jay through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. Back in 1 second.
Here's what's being said about Masterworks. My name is Jacob N. I'm from Long Island, and I've invested over $73,000 with Masterworks. My portfolio performance just wasn't cutting it. I researched all these alternative investments, like crypto and NFTs, but they didn't make sense to me. Then I read about Masterworks in Forbes, and I signed up right away. And now you can too. Thanks, Masterworks.
Get VIP access at masterworks.io and use promo code JACOB. See important disclosures at masterworks.io/DC.
All right, we are back, and I'm with Jay Jog. He's a co-founder and the engineering lead at Sei Network. As we've learnt, Layer 1 blockchain designed for trading. DeFi trading apps, really. Jay, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it, Jay. Just going to run some questions at you. Just give me your kind of honest opinions, hot take style. I know the answer to question 1, but where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
Yeah, I'm definitely much more in the multi-chain camp. I think in the longer term, there's not going to be one major chain that rules them all. I think that there's going to be some set of large interconnected chains that all operate with each other. I think that some of these are going to be general purpose chains. I don't see Ethereum going away anytime in the future. And I also am of the opinion, maybe a little bit controversial, that Solana isn't going to go anywhere either. And I think there's going to be a lot more use case specific chains that are optimized for certain types of applications to be building on them that are also going to end up being successful. The point around Solana, I would make that argument because Solana has a very strong developer community building up around it, right? Like one of the reasons that Ethereum was able to take off is because they have EVM, they have Solidity, and EVM is being forked and used on so many other chains that at this point it's just taking up too much developer mindshare. And I think the same thing is, I'm seeing that happen right now with Solana VM as well. For example, Nitro is an optimistic rollup building on Sei. It's supporting the Solana VM because a lot of Solana teams were interested in going to the Cosmos. And there's just so much Solana mindshare that I would argue that Solana it's not going to go away anytime in the near future. Around purely application-specific chains, I would be a little bit more pessimistic around whether there will be thousands and thousands of purely application-specific chains, at least until there's better tooling built out to support bridging and atomic multi-chain transactions. Because right now it's honestly pretty clunky to be operating between different chains, and it's very complex from like a retail user point of view as well. So in the longer term, I think that some use case specific chains that have big communities building up on top will likely end up playing a bigger role as well.
Any concern around the fact that Solana seems to go down every now and again?
I mean, the most recent times it's been due to bugs, and I think those are generally solvable problems. Like it's obviously pretty terrible for the community overall, but those are solvable problems. There's nothing fundamentally about Solana that I think will make it impossible for it to fix those issues.
Jay, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. And as an engineering guy, you'll be only too familiar with that kind of concept. But given with that in mind, DeFi, blockchain, whatever you like, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
So one thing that I think is going to be fundamentally different is the way that user onboarding works. Right now, I think the biggest thing that prevents retail from getting involved, like besides, like one obvious problem is like, yeah, sure, there's no applications that are super great for retail to be using. But I think besides that, like even if there were applications that were very strong for retail to be using and there was great marketing around it, I think the fundamental problem is like, it's so complicated right now. Like everything is so complex. You need to be doing so many things, and you need to be tracking things like your private keys. If you lose those private keys, you lose all your money. Like there's just too much going on. So I think in the longer term, there's going to be really good onboarding infrastructure built out so that someone that has no idea how crypto works does not need to do anything with their private keys. They don't need to store it. It'll be handled for them in some kind of decentralized, trustless manner. And they'll be able to, like stuff like bridging across different chains, all of that will be abstracted away from them as well. So in the longer term, I think that the user onboarding process is going to be very different. And I think the second thing that I'm excited about in the longer term is like one of the biggest things that's good about DeFi is everything is on-chain, everything is permissionless, and that leads to a lot of composability, right? Like if you're trying to have two different traditional finance companies work together, there's just way too much stuff that needs to happen, both from the legal side, compliance side, and also just from the engineering side. Whereas in crypto, everything is just accessible. Like you can have smart contracts that build on top of each other, get that launched in like a day or something. And I think that this innovation that'll facilitate is just going to result in there being a lot more DeFi use cases built up using composable applications in the future.
Very nicely said. All right, well, the flip side of this course, of course, Jay, is a quote by sci-fi author William Gibson, who famously said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
I mean, I would argue that the entire blockchain industry is that future, right? Yeah, I mean, outside of that, like certain types of applications or something, yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but I do think that most of the world right now is not using crypto. And like even my friends, like I'm based in Silicon Valley, right? And a lot of people I know in Silicon Valley, they're still pretty bearish on crypto, even in terms of like the technical side of it, which is like technical as in whether or not it's an interesting technical problem, which is very surprising to me. So I think in the longer term, there will be a lot more credibility and just acceptability tied to crypto.
Absolutely. All right, time to zoom out, time to get weird for a second as we start to finish off, Jay. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think long-term, I mean, I believe we're living the simulation right now, so I think long-term we're just going to, it's going to be kind of like the Matrix where everyone is just living in some kind of simulated world. And like, I don't think the human race is going to go away anytime, but I also think that the way that humans are going to progress might not be through doing things in whatever this reality is. It'll be through doing things in simulated realities.
And so you think you're a simulation guy? We're living in a simulation?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you've heard of the Bostrom paper around this. So Bostrom is this professor, I think, of philosophy at Stanford, and he put out a paper, I think, a few decades ago.
Nick Bostrom, right?
Exactly.
Yes,
yeah.
I know who yeah. Please continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, that paper just basically makes the argument that either it's impossible for there to be simulations in the future, or if simulations are possible, then we are living in one of those simulations right now, because there's theoretically infinite simulations that will be created if simulations are possible. And in that scenario, it's extremely unlikely for us to be in the one reality out of the infinite possible simulation. So I do think that humanity is capable of achieving any kind of technical feat. So I mean, around that, I think it's just a logical conclusion that we are probably living in a simulation right now.
Okay, if that is the case, you know, extrapolate out. If you once you kind of understand that you are in a simulation, what happens into the future as that simulated species of consciousness, whatever you want to call us, as we continue to evolve? What are the possible outcomes?
I think some of the things that are almost certainly going to happen, first of all, humans are going to start moving beyond the Earth. I think that is, I mean, we're already starting to see that happen right now with the kind of race to go to Mars between a lot of the existing entrepreneurs out there right now. I think the other thing that's going to happen is that humans are going to try to modify themselves in both an artificial sense, in terms of like augmenting the current body that we get right now, and also genetic sense, in the sense of modifying genes for I guess fetuses before they're born. So those are the two things that I definitely see happening. Yeah.
And so, you know, a fascinating subject matter. So what happens when you die?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's also ideas out there around how you can basically preserve your whatever you call it, like your brain or your spirit or whatever, like just retaining your conscious while having different types of bodies. I think that, like, I don't know the science behind retaining your conscious, but if that is possible to do, I definitely see a scenario in which a lot of people will elect to do that. So I can definitely see that happening as well. The only downside to that would just be, it is kind of like sad if you think about it, that if all of your friends, like, let's say that we right now grow up to be older at that time, like all of our friends will have, in theory, a lot of them might have passed away by that time, and then it might just be really lonely for the initial group of people that could elect to use that. But I think in the future there might just be everyone electing to preserve their consciousness for a very long time.
And so if that is possible, then it really means that within the simulation anything is possible. It's just a matter of well, we'll use the word human, but you know, what we think of as human at the moment, but perhaps in the future it'll be just pure technology. But it's just a matter of technology, creativity and imagination, but there are no real design rules governing what is possible.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, the final question, oddly enough, is Jay, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Science fiction. Let's see, there were a few different series that I liked when I was growing up. I'm not sure if any of these are science fiction. There was the entire Aragon series, which I read at least a couple of times. I think that might count as fantasy.
Sure.
There's the Percy Jackson series, which is probably also not science fiction. And then Harry Potter as well. So, I mean, those are the series that I would read a lot, but I don't know if any of them count as science fiction.
No, well, fantasy is, let's say, sci-fi adjacent, but you know, you could have just gone with the Nick Bostrom paper. So was that kind of Nick was the guy who I suppose was responsible for popularizing or seeding the idea of simulation theory. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's who my friends reference, and that's who whose paper I ended up reading, and that's where I ended up kind of agreeing with.
And what's the title of that paper again?
Let me Google it right now. Nick Bostrom, simulation theory.
Let's just get this right for the listeners, because, yeah.
Okay, it's called Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? And I think it was initially published in 2001. That's actually more recent than I would have anticipated.
Yeah. But yeah, Nick Bostrom, I mean, he's, yeah, similar ideas to the likes of Raker as well. Yeah. All right. Hey, this has been fun. Jay, have really enjoyed talking DeFi, the Sei Network, and of course, simulation theory with you. Links will be in the show notes to some of these things, perhaps even to Mr. Bostrom or Professor Bostrom's simulation theory paper. But yeah, take us out, Jay. Tell the people where you like to hang out online, where they can find you on Twitter or wherever else, and again, what people should do to keep up to date with Sei Network.
Absolutely, yeah. So to reach out to me, I'm on Twitter. My handle will be included in the show notes as well, but it's jandra_jog at Twitter. And to just be more active in the Sei community, I would recommend joining the Discord. That's where all of the alpha drops initially. That's where we're going to be having a lot of the conversations happening around how to be doing stuff with Sei in the future. So we'd definitely love to reach out or chat with you all. We're also part of the incentivized testnet right now, as mentioned before. So it'd be a great opportunity for you to get your hands dirty and play with Sei.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. All the best and bye for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Jay Jog from the Sei Network. You enjoyed talking to Jay. Really enjoyed the simulation theory discussion, of course. So I will put a link to that paper by Nick Bostrom in the show notes. Just such a, yeah, I mean, fascinating idea. Are we in fact in a simulation? It's kind of it's depressing and inspiring all at the same time, and well, just builds on all those ideas, you know. I think the Matrix called it, of course. But yeah, read the paper, my friends. Read the paper. All right, that is today's show, the crypto conversation, brought to you by Simulation Theory, hosted and published by Brave New Coin. Thanks for listening, team. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. Apologies for my voice today if I sound a bit off. I am a bit sick, actually. Anyway, hopefully be better by the next episode. See you then. See you real soon. That was today's show. I'm just going to stop talking. I'm babbling. Bye for now.